This story is called, After My Wife's Birthday, She Cheated on Me with My Cousin, and my parents told me not to mess up their new relationship. So I went back and took the diamond bracelet and the car I'd given her. Now she's crying and begging for another shot. Hey everyone, before we jump in, I just want to ask a quick favor. If you like stories like this, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It doesn't cost anything, it really helps the channel, and it makes sure you don't miss any future videos. Alright, let's get into it. So yeah, I'm just going to lay this out straight, because even now, it still feels unreal to me. My wife, Sophie, had just turned 31, and I went all in trying to make her birthday something she'd always remember. And yeah, she's definitely going to remember it. Just not for the reasons I had planned. We'd been married for 3 years. Things weren't perfect, what marriage ever is, but I genuinely believed we were strong. I was the kind of guy who never forgot anniversaries, who'd grab her favorite snacks on the way home from work, and who still planned little date nights even when I was buried in work. So when her birthday came around, I decided to go big, to really show her how much she meant to me. The plan was pretty simple but thoughtful. I set up a surprise dinner with her closest friends and family at her favorite Italian restaurant. I ordered a custom cake decorated with her favorite flowers, lavender and daisies, in case you're wondering. And to top it all off, I got her a diamond bracelet she'd been hinting at for months. It wasn't cheap, but honestly, I didn't care. You only turn 31 once, right? So the night starts off, and everything's going exactly how I hoped. Sophie's smiling, laughing, soaking in all the attention. People are raising their glasses, giving little speeches, and for a moment, I felt like I absolutely nailed it. I even had her favorite song lined up to play right when they brought out the cake. Everyone was enjoying themselves, and I was just sitting there, happy, watching her have a great time. But then, somewhere between dinner and dessert, I realized she wasn't at the table anymore. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe she stepped out to take a call, or went to the restroom. No big deal. But then 15 minutes went by, then 20. That's when I started to get a little uneasy. I asked around the table if anyone had seen her, but nobody had. So I got up and started checking around the restaurant. The bar, the entrance, but she was nowhere to be found. Then I remembered there was a hallway near the restrooms that led to a back storage area. I figured maybe she just needed a minute to herself, or some fresh air. So I headed down that hallway. And that's when everything fell apart. As I got closer, I heard voices. They were quiet, kind of hushed, but way too close together to ignore. My stomach dropped instantly, but I kept moving forward anyway. The sound was coming from the coat closet at the end of the hall. The door wasn't fully closed, and I could see the faint light of a phone screen through the crack. Every instinct in me was screaming to turn around and walk away. But I didn't. I pushed the door open, and there they were. Sophie, and my cousin, Brandon. They were wrapped up in each other, her fingers tangled in his hair, his hands gripping her waist like they didn't have a care in the world. The look on their faces when they saw me. I'll never forget that. Sophie's eyes went wide, like a kid caught red-handed. Brandon just froze, like he'd seen a ghost. For a moment, nobody said a word. And then I snapped. I grabbed Brandon by his collar and slammed him back against the wall hard enough to rattle the coat rack. What the hell is wrong with you? I shouted. Sophie rushed in between us, trying to calm things down, saying, "It's not what it looks like." I let out this bitter laugh. Not what it looks like. You're making out with my cousin at your own birthday party. What else is it supposed to be? Brandon started mumbling something like, "It just happened." But I cut him off immediately. You don't get to talk to me. I shoved him away and turned back to Sophie. Don't even think about coming home tonight, I said, my voice shaking with anger. She opened her mouth like she was about to explain, but I didn't want to hear it. We're done, I said, and walked out. After that, the whole night just kind of blurred together. I didn't go back to the table. I didn't explain anything to anyone. I just grabbed my keys and left. I ended up at some random 24-hour diner, sitting alone in a booth, trying to wrap my head around what I had just seen. How does something like that even happen? And with Brandon, of all people. We were never close, but I knew exactly the kind of guy he was, the type who brags about being smooth, even though he's pushing 33 and still bouncing between odd jobs and couches. Honestly, I should have expected something like that from him. But Sophie? That, I never saw coming. When I finally got back home later that night, she wasn't there. Good. I didn't want to see her anyway. I stayed up most of the night replaying everything in my head, going over every moment, trying to figure out if I missed something. Were there signs? Did she seem distant? Or was I just too blind to notice? The next morning, my phone was full of missed calls and messages from her. At first, it was, "Can we talk?" And, "It's not what you think." And then it turned into, "I'm sorry, and please don't do this." I ignored all of it. What was there to even say? She made her decision the second she chose to hook up with Brandon in the middle of her own birthday party. Around noon, my mom called. She said Sophie had told her we got into a fight, and wanted to know what really happened. So I told her straight. She was kissing Brandon at the restaurant. I said. There was a pause on the line, and then she just sighed and said, "We'll talk later." "We'll talk later?" That's it. No anger. No shock. No, I can't believe she did that to you. Just, "We'll talk later." It honestly felt like everything had flipped upside down. By the end of the day, the whole family knew. People started calling, some asking if it was true, others telling me to calm down and not do anything stupid. Calm down. My wife just blew up our marriage, and somehow I'm the one being told to take it easy? That night, Sophie showed up at the house. I didn't let her in. She stood outside crying, saying she made a mistake and that we could fix this. I just looked at her through the window and said, "Go stay with Brandon. You two deserve each other." And that was it for now. At that point, I figured at least my family would have my back. I mean, my wife and my cousin betrayed me. It's pretty clear who's in the wrong, right? Yeah, not exactly. Apparently, my family had a very different idea of what loyalty looks like. 2 days after everything went down, my mom called and asked me to come over. "We need to talk," she said, using that serious tone she always pulls out when something's up. I thought maybe they were going to check on me, maybe support me, maybe even tear into Brandon for what he did. I had no idea I was walking into something completely different. The moment I got to their house, I could feel something was off. My dad was sitting at the table with his arms crossed, and my mom was pacing like she'd been practicing what she was about to say. The second I stepped inside, I knew this wasn't going to go the way I hoped. "Sit down," my dad said, pointing to the chair. "No, how are you doing? No, are you okay? Just straight to business." I sat down anyway, figuring I'd hear them out. "We need to talk about Sophie and Brandon," my mom began. My stomach twisted. I thought maybe they were going to tell me Brandon apologized, or that Sophie was leaving. But no, what she said next made me want to flip the table. "Look, what happened wasn't great," my mom said, like she was talking about someone spilling wine at dinner instead of blowing up a marriage. "But things like this, they happen. These things happen." I repeated, my voice coming out louder than I meant it to. "What does that even mean?" "She cheated on me. With Brandon, in case that part got lost." My dad raised his hand like he was calling a timeout in a game. "Son, we're not saying it's right, but you've got to be realistic." "Realistic?" I shot back. "If Sophie and Brandon have feelings for each other," he continued, "you can't force them to stay apart." I just stared at him for a second, trying to process what I was hearing. Then I let out a laugh. Not because anything was funny, but because the whole thing sounded insane. "Are you actually trying to justify this right now?" They were making out in a closet at her birthday party. "She's my wife. Brandon's my cousin." I shook my head. "Which part of that sounds even remotely okay to you?" "Listen," my mom said, sitting down beside me like changing her tone would fix everything. "No one is saying it's okay. But if they have something real." "Something real?" I cut in. "They were sneaking around behind my back." "That's not real. That's disgusting." At that point, I could feel my blood boiling. I looked over at my dad, hoping, just hoping, he'd back me up. Instead, he sighed. "You need to move on," he said. "Holding on to all this anger isn't going to help anyone." "Move on," I repeated slowly. So that was their solution. Just act like none of it happened. Let Sophie and Brandon ride off into the sunset together while I'm supposed to just get over it. It felt like they cared more about keeping the family image intact than the fact that I was the one who got completely betrayed. "You've got to be kidding me," I said, pushing my chair back and standing up. "You're seriously taking their side?" "We're not taking sides," my mom said quickly. "We just think everyone would be better off if this is handled calmly." "Calmly?" I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "You want calm? Fine. Here's calm." I looked right at them. "I'm done with both of them. And if you keep making excuses for what they did, then I'm done with you too." My mom looked hurt, but at that point, I didn't care. I wasn't about to sit there and pretend that what Sophie and Brandon did was some minor issue we could just talk through over dinner. I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me on the way out. On the drive home, that conversation just kept replaying in my head. I couldn't wrap my mind around how they were acting like this was no big deal. My wife cheated on me with my cousin, and their response was basically to sweep it under the rug for the sake of family harmony. It was insane. By the time I got home, my phone was blowing up. Some messages were from Sophie, still trying to apologize, still trying to explain herself. The rest were from my parents, telling me I was overreacting and needed to come back so we could talk this through. Talk what through? There was nothing left to talk about. Sophie and Brandon made their choices. Now they get to live with the consequences. If my parents wanted to play peacemaker, that was their business. But I wasn't about to be part of whatever twisted version of family they were trying to hold together. Later that night, my sister Lily called. Lily's always been the one person in the family who actually has my back. She's a few years younger than me, but she's never been afraid to call people out when they're being ridiculous. I heard what happened, she said, skipping right past any small talk. Mom and Dad are acting like complete idiots. You don't have to tell me, I replied. I seriously can't believe they're defending Sophie and Brandon. They're not really defending them, she said. Not exactly. Then what are they doing? I asked. They're just trying to keep the family from falling apart. Well, newsflash, it already has, I snapped. And none of that is on me. I know, she said quickly. I just wanted you to hear it from someone. I'm on your side. What they did to you is messed up. You have every right to be angry. Hearing that, honestly, it hit harder than I expected. At least someone understood. I appreciate that, I told her. But I don't even know how to deal with Mom and Dad anymore. They're acting like I'm the problem. You're not, she said firmly. They're just scared of confrontation. You know how they are. They'd rather avoid the real issue than face it. We talked for a while after that, mostly just venting about how messed up the whole situation was. By the time we hung up, I felt a little lighter. Knowing Lily had my back helped. But the frustration with my parents? That was still there, sitting just under the surface. The next day, my dad texted me, asking if I was ready to talk like adults. I didn't reply. I was done talking. They made their position clear, and I made mine. From that point on, I kept my distance. No Sunday dinners. No answering their calls. No trying to explain myself anymore. If they couldn't see how wrong they were, that was on them. It's crazy how fast people show you who they really are when things fall apart. I always thought my parents would be the first ones to stand by me. Instead, they chose the people who stabbed me in the back. I don't know what their endgame is, but I'm not playing along. If they want to side with Sophie and Brandon, they can have them. I'm out. I'll keep you posted on what happens next. Update 1. Alright, here's the next update, because somehow, this situation just keeps getting worse. After everything with Sophie and Brandon, I was trying to move on. Or at least distract myself enough not to think about it constantly. I'd already cut most contact with my parents. Sophie was out of the house. I wasn't answering her calls. I thought I'd already dealt with the worst of it. I was wrong. About a week after everything blew up, Sophie texted me from a random number, because yeah, I had her blocked everywhere else. At first, I wasn't even going to open it. But curiosity got the better of me. The message started the same way they all did. Please, can we talk? I need to explain. The usual nonsense. I was about to delete it when I saw the last line. And I think I should keep the bracelet. It was a gift, after all. I just stared at my phone. The nerve. She seriously thought she was entitled to keep the diamond bracelet I gave her? A bracelet I busted my ass to afford? After everything she did? I honestly couldn't wrap my head around that level of entitlement. Let me back up for a second. That bracelet wasn't just some random piece of jewelry. It was expensive, really expensive. I spent months saving up for it, thinking it would be something meaningful, something that showed her how much she meant to me. She'd wanted it forever, and I thought it would be the perfect gift. And now, after cheating on me with my own cousin, she thought she deserved to keep it? Yeah, not happening. I didn't respond right away. I needed a minute to cool off. But the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. There was no way I was letting her walk away with that bracelet like it was some kind of reward. So I started looking into things. Turns out, Sophie had moved into a small apartment in the next town over. Probably the best Brandon could manage, considering the guy barely has his life together. I wasn't planning to just show up at her place out of nowhere, but I didn't know where she worked. Sophie had been working at this boutique jewelry store downtown for a while, and I figured there was a good chance she kept the bracelet in her locker there for safekeeping. The next morning, I went by the store pretending I was just there to browse. I walked in, made a bit of small talk with one of her coworkers, and casually looked around like I wasn't there for anything specific. Sure enough, Sophie was in the back, helping a customer. She noticed me almost right away, and her face instantly turned red. "What are you doing here?" she hissed as she walked over. "I'm here for the bracelet," I said calmly. "You know, the one I bought for you." She looked at me like I'd just slapped her across the face. "Are you serious right now? It was a gift." "It was a gift for my wife," I shot back. "You're not my wife anymore, Sophie. So go ahead and hand it over." She started stammering, trying to argue that I was being unfair, but I wasn't in the mood to hear any of it. "You can give it to me now," I said evenly, "or I can get the cops involved. Your choice." That's when her manager noticed something was going on and came over to see what the issue was. Sophie immediately tried to spin some emotional story, but I cut in before she could get too far. I pulled out the receipt. Yeah, I kept it, because I'm that kind of guy, and explained that I paid for the bracelet and that it wasn't legally hers to keep. The manager looked uncomfortable, but in the end, he sided with me. Sophie stormed off to the back, muttering under her breath, and came back a minute later with the bracelet in her hand. "Here," she snapped, practically throwing it at me. "I hope you're happy." "Oh, I am," I said, slipping it into my pocket. "Thanks for making it easy." I walked out of that store feeling lighter than I had in days. It wasn't just about getting a piece of jewelry back. It felt like I was taking back a piece of my self-respect. After that, I went straight to a jeweler and sold it. I didn't even care about getting full price. Just knowing it was gone was enough for me. The guy handed me cash on the spot, and I ended up using it to treat myself. Picked up a new laptop and put some upgrades into my car. Of course, Sophie wasn't going to let it go quietly. That same night, she texted me again. "You're pathetic. You stole my bracelet. Hope you feel good about yourself." I didn't even bother replying. What could she possibly say that would justify any of this? The next day, my mom called me. Apparently, Sophie had reached out to her to complain. "She says you're being spiteful," my mom told me. Spiteful? I laughed. She cheated on me with Brandon and thought she could keep the bracelet I paid for. Yeah, no. Well, my mom started. But I cut her off before she could go any further. Don't even try to defend her, Mom. She let out a sigh, but didn't push it. I guess even she realized I wasn't backing down. The funniest part? Later that week, Brandon actually called me and left a voicemail telling me I needed to grow up and let Sophie keep the bracelet. I didn't even listen to the whole thing. I just deleted it. If he thought I cared about his opinion, he was even more clueless than I thought. At the end of the day, it was never really about the bracelet or the money. It was about principle. Sophie wasn't going to walk away from this acting like she was the victim. Taking that bracelet back was my way of saying, "No, you don't get to win here." And honestly, it felt damn good. Then there was the car. Let me give you a little background. Last year, for our anniversary, I bought Sophie a sleek red coupe. It wasn't brand new, but it was clean, sporty, and exactly the kind of car she'd been hinting about for months. I figured, why not? She was my wife. I thought she deserved it. But now, the idea of her and Brandon driving around in my car made my blood boil. Legally, the car was still in my name. I handled the payments, the insurance, the paperwork, everything. Sophie didn't put a single cent into it. When I kicked her out after everything went down, I didn't even think about taking the car back right away. Honestly, I had bigger things on my mind. But as time passed, and I kept hearing about her and Brandon playing house, it started to eat at me. Why should they get to enjoy something I paid for? The final straw came when my friend Marcus called me out of nowhere. "Dude," he said, "I think I just saw your car." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Some scruffy guy, dark hair, kinda tall, brought it in for maintenance," Marcus said. He looked like he had no clue what he was doing. I didn't need a second guess. Brandon. The nerve of this guy. Not only was he driving my car, but he had the audacity to bring it into a dealership like it belonged to him. "Do me a favor," I told Marcus. "Hold on to it. Don't let them take it back. I'll be there first thing tomorrow." The next morning, I showed up at the dealership with every piece of paperwork I had, the title, insurance, everything proving the car was mine. Marcus had already filled his boss in, so when I got there, the process was smooth. They handed me the keys and said, "It's all yours." Let me tell you, sliding back into that driver's seat felt incredible. It wasn't just about the car. It was about taking back something that was mine. I drove off that lot with the biggest grin on my face. Of course, it didn't take long for Sophie and Brandon to realize what happened. Sophie called first. I ignored it. Then came the texts. "Why did you take the car? We need it." "You're being petty. Just let us have it." Petty? The audacity. I didn't respond. There was no way I was letting them guilt me into giving it back. Then Brandon called. I didn't recognize the number, so I picked up. "Yo, what's your problem, man?" he started, all cocky like he thought he could intimidate me. "My problem," I said, laughing. "You're driving a car I paid for. That's my problem." "You can't just take it," he shouted. "That's illegal." "Actually, it's not," I replied. Lily called me later that night, laughing so hard she could barely get the words out. "Brandon is losing it," she said. "He's telling everyone you stole the car and left them stranded." I couldn't help but laugh. Stranded? He's got legs. He'll figure it out. Apparently, they'd been relying on that car for everything. Groceries, errands, even job hunting, though I doubt Brandon was putting much effort into that. Without it, they were basically stuck. Lily said my parents were trying to step in again, saying I should have at least warned them before taking the car. Why would I do that? I said, so they could hide it or mess it up before I got there. She agreed with me, of course. But that didn't stop my mom from leaving me a voicemail later that night. "Honey, I understand you're upset, but taking the car wasn't the right way to handle this. They're struggling, and you're only making things harder for them," she added. I didn't even bother calling her back. Struggling? Maybe they should have thought about that before they decided to stab me in the back. The funniest part came a couple days later when I found out Brandon had actually tried to borrow money from my parents to get himself another car. And get this, my dad told him to figure it out on his own. Honestly, that caught me off guard a little. Maybe, just maybe, they were starting to see through his nonsense. As for me, I was back behind the wheel of my car, and every time I drove it, it felt like a small win. Every time I parked it outside my house, I'd get this little sense of satisfaction knowing Sophie and Brandon were out there scrambling to figure out rides. The whole situation has been a complete mess, no doubt about that. But if there's one thing I've taken away from all of this, it's pretty simple. You don't owe anyone anything, especially not people who've betrayed you. Taking the car back wasn't just about the car itself. It was about reminding myself that I'm not someone they can walk all over. So if anyone out there is dealing with entitled exes or shady family members, take your power back. Whether it's a car, a bracelet, or just your peace of mind, don't let them win. And to Sophie and Brandon, on the off chance you're somehow reading this, good luck catching the bus. I'll keep you all updated. Thanks for sticking around. Update 2. Alright, so if you thought things had settled down after the whole car situation, yeah, not even close. Because somehow, it managed to get even more chaotic. Turns out, karma wasn't quite done with Sophie and Brandon yet. This time, though, it felt like the universe stepped in directly and decided to show Brandon what happens when you go through life thinking you can get away with anything. It all kicked off with a call from my younger sister, Lily. At this point, she's basically my inside source for everything going on in the family, since I'm not exactly on speaking terms with most of them anymore. "You're not going to believe this," she said, barely holding back laughter. "What now?" I asked, already preparing myself for whatever nonsense came next. "Brandon got arrested. I swear, I almost dropped my phone." "Wait, what? Arrested? For what?" "Shoplifting," she said, clearly enjoying this way more than she should have. "Apparently, he tried to steal a couple of phones from an electronics store and got caught red-handed." "I'm not even going to lie," I laughed. "Of course Brandon would do something like that. This is the same guy who thought hooking up with my wife at her birthday party was a good idea and then acted like he was the victim afterward. Honestly, it was only a matter of time before his stupidity caught up with him." Lily went on to give me the full story. Apparently, Brandon had been trying to flip the phones for quick cash, probably because he and Sophie were completely broke. He walked into the store, grabbed a couple of display models, and tried to slip them into his bag like nobody would notice. Except, the place had cameras everywhere, and the staff spotted him almost immediately. By the time he tried to walk out, there were already employees waiting for him at the door. They stopped him, called the cops, and next thing you know, Brandon's getting walked out in handcuffs. I couldn't stop laughing while Lily was telling me all this. It was just so perfectly Brandon, always thinking he can skate by without consequences, until reality finally catches up. "Man, he's a real genius," I said, still chuckling. "Oh, it gets better," Lily replied. "Guess who bailed him out?" "Let me guess," I said. "Mom and Dad." "Yep," she confirmed. "Mom was like, we can't just leave him in there," and Dad went along with it. Unbelievable. My parents had already been bending over backward to defend Brandon this whole time, and now they were literally bailing him out of jail. "What about Sophie?" I asked. "Was she there?" "No," Lily said. "She wasn't there when it happened. But from what I hear, she's freaking out. They're even more broke now." Apparently, Brandon had promised to pay my parents back. Yeah, right. That didn't surprise me at all. Brandon's never exactly been responsible, especially when it comes to money. He spent his whole life skating by, relying on charm and luck to get him out of trouble. But charm doesn't do much when you're getting booked for theft. Over the next few days, news about his arrest spread through the family like wildfire. Some people tried to keep it quiet, but you know how that goes. By the end of the week, everyone knew. The reactions were all over the place. Some family members, mainly my parents and Brandon's mom, tried to downplay it, saying it was just a mistake and that he'd been under a lot of stress. Others, they were absolutely roasting him. "Who tries to steal phones from a store covered in cameras?" one of my cousins apparently said in the family group chat. "Brandon," another one replied. The whole situation was a mess, and honestly, I couldn't look away. Not because I wanted to see him fail, but because it felt like karma finally catching up. For once, he couldn't just charm his way out of it. Sophie, on the other hand, wasn't handling things well at all. According to Lily, she was going around trying to spin the whole thing like it was some kind of misunderstanding. "She's telling people Brandon was framed," Lily said, "or that the store staff overreacted. It's honestly pathetic." "Frame?" I laughed. "What does she think this is, a crime show?" It was obvious she was desperate to keep up appearances, but at that point, their whole little fantasy life was starting to fall apart. Not long after that, Lily called me again. "You're not going to believe this," she said, and at this point, that had basically become her catchphrase. "What now?" I asked. "Sophie's been calling people asking for money." I actually laughed out loud. "Seriously? And who's dumb enough to give it to her?" "Not many," Lily said, "but she's definitely trying." She even asked Mom and Dad again, but I think Dad finally put his foot down. Hearing that was unexpected, but I won't lie, it was a little satisfying too. Maybe, Just maybe, my parents were finally starting to realize that constantly bailing out Sophie and Brandon wasn't their responsibility. As for me, I had zero intention of getting dragged back into their mess. They made their choices, and now they could deal with the consequences. At that point, it was simple in my mind. This was their problem, not mine. Honestly, the funniest part of everything? Brandon's arrest completely destroyed whatever little credibility he had left with the family. Even the relatives who used to defend him started seeing him for what he really is, a lazy, entitled screw-up who thinks he's smarter than everyone else. And Sophie? She was right there in the middle of it all. She tied herself to Brandon, and now she had a front-row seat watching everything fall apart. The way I saw it, this was just the universe balancing things out. They thought they could betray me and walk away like nothing happened. Turns out, life had a different plan. Now they were broke, embarrassed, and scrambling just to stay afloat, while I was out here finally getting my life back together. Funny how things work out sometimes. At that point, I was busy filing for divorce, but I figured I'd update you all once I knew how it played out, or if anything else crazy happened. Update 3. Alright, I'm back, and this might be the final update. After months of dealing with Sophie and Brandon's drama, the family tension, and more entitlement than I thought was even possible, everything finally reached a breaking point. And I'm not gonna lie, it was worth the wait. After Brandon got arrested and Sophie started begging everyone for money, I honestly thought that was the end of it. They were broke, embarrassed, and sinking fast, and I was perfectly fine letting them deal with the mess they created. But of course, Sophie had one last move. It started with a call from my lawyer. "You're not going to like this," he said. Sophie's lawyer reached out. "She's trying to file for alimony." I nearly choked on my coffee. Alimony? From me? After cheating on me with my own cousin, getting kicked out of my house, and trying to keep the car and bracelet I paid for? The level of entitlement was unreal. Can she even do that? I asked, trying to process it. Well, my lawyer said, technically, she can file. But given everything, her infidelity, the financial records you have, and her current situation, it's very unlikely she'll win. Still, we need to prepare. Prepare? That part was easy. I had everything. Text messages, witnesses, and even photos from people at the party who saw Sophie and Brandon sneaking off together. If she wanted to take this to court, I was more than ready. Over the next couple of weeks, my lawyer and I built a solid case. We gathered proof of her cheating, proof that she barely contributed financially during our marriage, and proof that she was now living with Brandon, who, let's be honest, wasn't exactly an upgrade. When the court date finally came, I walked in calm and confident. Sophie, on the other hand, looked like she hadn't slept in days. And Brandon? He was sitting in the back like some kind of supportive boyfriend. I couldn't help but smirk when I saw him. The hearing itself almost felt like a joke. Her lawyer tried to paint this picture of her making huge sacrifices during the marriage and needing financial support to get back on her feet. Sacrifices? I muttered under my breath. Like what? Her dignity. When it was my turn, I kept it straightforward. I laid everything out clearly. Sophie cheated on me, with Brandon, and multiple people could confirm it. She didn't contribute financially. The car and bracelet she tried to keep? I paid for both. And now she was living with Brandon. So if anyone should be supporting her, it sure wasn't me. The judge didn't seem impressed by her argument at all. At one point, I swear I saw him roll his eyes. By the end of it, her case completely fell apart. The judge denied her request for alimony and basically told her to sort out her own life without dragging me into it. Walking out of that courtroom felt incredible. Not just a win, it felt like total closure. Sophie didn't even look at me on the way out, and Brandon followed behind her like a kicked dog. But somehow it still wasn't over. Because the universe had one last twist to throw in. A few weeks later, Lily called me again. Sophie and Brandon broke up, she said. Apparently, their whole love story didn't hold up once reality kicked in. Brandon couldn't keep a job, Sophie was fed up with being broke, and all that pressure finally blew everything up between them. You want to hear the best part? Lily asked, barely containing her excitement. Go ahead, I said. Sophie tried to move back in with Mom and Dad, and they said no. I actually paused for a second. My parents, who had been defending her this whole time, finally shut the door on her. Why? I asked. Because they're done, Lily said. I think Dad finally realized she was just using them. That right there? That was the final piece. Sophie, who thought she could manipulate everyone and come out on top, ended up completely alone. Brandon was gone. My parents were done enabling her. And me? I was finally free. No more drama. No more stress. No more dealing with any of it. Life's been pretty good since then, not gonna lie. I even sold the red coupe, again, and upgraded to a truck for myself. Looking back at everything now, I can honestly say I don't regret a thing. Sophie and Brandon thought they could betray me and walk away clean. But karma had other plans. And while they're out there dealing with the mess they made, I'm here, living my life. So if you're dealing with cheaters, liars, or family that doesn't have your back, don't let them win. Stand your ground. Take back what's yours. And let karma handle the rest. And to Sophie and Brandon, once again, thanks for the life lessons. Hope you're enjoying that happy ending. Oh wait, you're not. And yeah, victory never felt this good.